Thank you for inviting me. It's not a happy occasion, but anything but surprising. It is the least surprising event that I can think of. It's been long predicted. In fact, the first time I predicted, I explained why Israel is, and specifically under the Netanyahu government, is keen to attack Iran, was in February 2012. In an article in the Weekly Worker titled Netanyahu's War Wish. And since then, it has been a sort of leitmotif in Netanyahu's express exhortation to allow the United States, to allow Israel to attack Iran. What has changed, why it has taken so long, is because previous US administrations were wary of allowing Israel to start a war that may end up in a larger conflict that may involve the United States itself. And they had a bitter experience of previous conflicts in which they got entangled and which ended not too happily for the United States itself, although much less happily for the people attacked in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, and so forth. But Trump is less inhibited, let us say, as we can see. Although he had the reputation of being a peace-loving politician, that is to say, preferring economic pressures to warlike pressures, to warlike involvement, he is also much less predictable in this respect. And there is no doubt that Trump personally was involved in actually giving the green light to Netanyahu to launch this unsurprising attack. I want to explain the background to this, because this is not a coincidental act on Israel's part. I want to explain the motivation behind it, the reasoning behind this kind of behavior on part of Israel. It is really a consequence, an offshoot of Israel's overriding strategic aim. What is the overriding strategic aim of the State of Israel? It is to complete the Zionist project of colonization of the land of Israel. The land of Israel, of course, is, at the very least, includes the area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, but it goes, in fact, it's an ill-defined part of the world that can go far beyond this and is ultimately rooted in the divine promise of the Jehovah to Abraham in the book of Genesis. Now, completing the Zionist project of colonization implies or entails, necessitates two things: territorial expansion, that is to say, to get hold of the whole promised land, and ethnic cleansing. Because the whole of this territory that Israel wants to get hold of, the Zionist project aims at, is supposed to become a Jewish nation state, which means that a stable majority of Jews should inhabit it, and the Palestinian inhabitants or non-Jewish inhabitants of this area are surplus to requirement, and they should be got rid of somehow or other. Another consequence, another precondition for completing the Zionist project is securing regional hegemony. Israel must become a regional superpower, a nuclear monopolist, and it entitles continual war in order to secure this position. By saying that Israel must be aims at securing a nuclear monopoly, I mean that Israel must not only be the only possession of nuclear weapons, but also the only state in the region that has a potential, a possibility of constructing nuclear weapons. That is to say, Israel aims at becoming a monopolist of not only nuclear weapons, but nuclear capability, which is not the same thing at all, because there are several states in the world that have nuclear capability, but are, for one reason or another, not actually possessing nuclear weapons. Now, these two aims, that is to say, territorial expansion and ethnic cleansing, and securing a regional hegemony, are interconnected. One follows from the other. And I want to briefly survey the ways that they are connected and the way one entails the other. Why the completion of the Zionist project requires Israel to be a local hegemon. On the most elementary level is the following. That's number one, colonization provokes opposition by other states, opposition to the expansion of the state of Israel. Since colonization and completion of the Zionist project entails territorial expansion, it provokes opposition by the neighboring states at whose expense Israel is expanding, or who regard Israel's expansion as a potential danger to themselves. It also provokes opposition and solidarity by the people in the surrounding region. That is to say, mostly the Arabs of the Arab East, who are motivated by solidarity with the Palestinian people, and who therefore are pushing their own governments despite themselves to show some opposition to Israeli expansion. So on this very elementary level, Israel needs to be militarily superior to the surrounding states in the region. On a more profound historical level, the Zionist project has always been in need of imperialist sponsorship. It did not have a natural mother country, and therefore it needed a surrogate mother country. And you can compare this to a local mafioso who needs to sell himself to a global mafia boss as the best choice for regional deputy. That is to say, Israel needs the protection of the dominant hegemonic imperialist state, currently the United States, as granting it the position of sheriff or deputy in the Middle East region. There is a mutual interest, therefore, in promoting Israel as a powerful local ally and enforcer. That is to say, Israel has a value for the world hegemon, the American imperialism, in as much as it is a powerful state. That is to say, the United States is interested in relying for its enforcement in the region on a local powerful state. So Israel has an inbuilt need to show itself as the most powerful and most ruthless, I would emphasize, not only powerful, but ruthless actor in the region. This is a mutual interest of both the global mafia boss and Israel as its local sheriff or deputy. They are both interested in Israel being seen as a ruthless, aggressive, and powerful enforcer in the region. Israel is interested in it because this is a selling point for itself as the local deputy. And of course, the United States is interested in using Israel as its deputy in as much as it is a powerful and ruthless local actor. And finally, as I pointed out in the article that I referred to earlier, dating from 2012, local aggression wars on the part of Israel are an excellent opportunity for expansion and ethnic cleansing. If the strategic aim of Israel is completion of the Zionist project of colonization, then local wars sparked by Israel or provoked by Israel are an excellent opportunity to be able to perpetrate ethnic cleansing. If you want to an illustration of this, I'll give you two quotes from today's papers. First of all, from today's Guardian, a headline in today's Guardian. Quote, strikes on Iran ease pressure on Israel to end starvation in Gaza. What does it mean? It means that until this provocation by Israel, until this attack by Israel, there was an increasing acceptance by Western countries of the pressure from below, from on the part of of civil society to do something about the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, about the genocide. Belatedly, too little and too late, but still there was a mounting amount of pressure on the part of countries, including the United Kingdom, but France, even Germany, starting to apply a mild amount of pressure on Israel to stop the genocide in Gaza. But now that Israel has attacked Iran on behalf of the united Western imperialist community, so-called, the pressure has been eased. So the Guardian sums it up, as I quoted it: strikes on Iran ease pressure on Israel to end starvation in Gaza. That is an illustration how a regional war that is, in this case, provoked quite openly, initiated, provoked by Israel, helps in the other aim of the Zionist project of ethnic cleansing. And in today's Haaretz, I quote a headline: Gaza residents say IDF escalated attacks in Strip since Israel launched war on Iran. Okay, well, that amounts to the same thing. Since Israel has started the war, this doesn't mean that pressure has been removed from Gaza and is now Israel is concentrating on its war with Iran. Not at all. Actually, quite the contrary. The war on Iran has given Israel an opportunity since its act is in against Iran is actually condoned by all these Western imperialist countries, or the members of the Western imperialist superstructure. The pressure on Israel has been eased, and it enables it to perpetrate ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip, and no doubt very soon in the West Bank, without incurring diplomatic pressure on the part of the Western countries. So there you have it. I think that's all I have to say as an opener. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Moshe. I want to start by talking about something that I heard on Friday, believe it or not, on Radio 4. There's the distinction between preventive war and preemptive war. Now, those of us who have debated ad infinitum Iran-Iraq war have always said that, have always argued, some of us have argued, that maybe Saddam's attack on Iran was preemptive. He knew Iran was going to attack, or Iran had organized the Shias, who later America put to power, by the way. And that's why he attacked Iran. I'm not fully in favor of that view, but that's a possibility. And then we have, so preemptive war is apparently acceptable or can be legitimate. Preventive war is not. And preventive war is when you claim that in the future, at an undetermined time, a country might attack us. And in this case, you're arguing that a country will have a nuclear bomb and will attack us, which is basically Israel's argument, as far as I can see. And it's amazing. The entire press and media have accepted this. When you're being interviewed, you have to explain, well, where exactly is this atomic bomb? How did they prevent an atomic attack on Israel? Let's go to the IAEA meeting of last week, which apparently, or according to Netanyahu, is the reason why this attack took place now. I mean, there are many reasons, and I think Moshe explained the historic reasons and the current reasons for this much better than I could. But let's stick to what the IAEA meeting, which is now used as an excuse, did really actually say Iran has something like 400 kilograms of U-235, uranium-235. This is the kind of uranium that can be used in an atomic bomb at 60% enrichment. For uranium to be able to be used for a nuclear weapon, you have to have 90% enrichment. This was put forward as non-compliance with NPT. European countries signed up to it. Israel took it as a reason. There was another very bizarre event around this IAEA meeting. The International Atomic Energy Authority claimed that their secret documents had been stolen by Iran. Now, I'm not quite sure how that could have happened, but all we know is that Iran hacked an Israeli nuclear document dump. And as many people have pointed out, was the IAEA saving its nuclear documents in Israel? Is that what it's saying? Anyway, this is where we are. The attack has taken many levels, as you know. I think it's very well programmed. It's been very well rehearsed. The IDF attacked Iran's revolutionary leaders. That was stage one. The nuclear installations were attacked next, and the latest stage is attacking oil and petroleum reserves. So it's got a plan. The Iranian government claims now that this was a victory. I think, I mean, even by the standards of Iranian propaganda, this is too much. They clearly were taken by surprise. The reason I say this is that there is reliable information that the reformist factions of the regime who were leading these negotiations in Oman were under the impression that a deal with the US was possible, maybe not imminent, but possible. And some of them had told people around them that this Sunday, today's meeting in Oman would lead to final victory. Obviously, that was total nonsense. The question remains as to how far did the US support this? Clearly, the US gave the green light. Trump admitted it. On Friday, I heard this tweet, I read this tweet on Truth, apparently, that was reported elsewhere, that Trump said Israel is likely to attend in the near future, but I still think we should carry on with negotiations. Now, the question is, did Trump realize the extent of the attack? Probably he did. There are those who argue that he was still under the impressions that a limited attack will give the US and Witkoff an upper hand in the negotiations in Oman. In other words, he's been saying this on a number of occasions that Iran is a very difficult negotiator, but we are making progress. So maybe there is an element of truth in that. I really don't want to go too far into such speculation. We don't know. The nuclear plants, the attack on the nuclear plants has implications. Al-Baradei, who, if you remember, was the head of IAEA, is stating quite clearly that attacking a nuclear installation is irresponsible because of all the worries. And members of my family on a regular basis in the last 3 days have asked me, are we going to be poisoned by nuclear radiation? The answer is probably not at this stage. The reason is very clear. The bases, Fordow, Natanz, Hondad have been damaged, but the damage is on surface level or at lower level. Most of the actual nuclear enrichment is happening in these plants 3 miles, 4 miles under the ground. And so far, if there had been a damage to any of these, we would have known about it. The IAEA chief, Grossi, is quoted, I think last night, saying they are monitoring, and so far, no damage to the basics. However, where is Netanyahu on this? He wants this war to become stronger and stronger, more of a pictures of Israelis, civilians being killed, as they have been showing in the last 2 days, and then the US or Europe gets involved, and then the United States has the capability of bunker buster bombs. The planes that the United States has currently moved to the Middle East have such an ability. My own question remains, if they unleashed such an attack, and if there were radiations on the scales that one can expect, it would be far worse than the Chernobyl incident. It certainly would, as the Qataris have said, as the Arabs of the Persian Gulf have said, it will at least endanger the lives of millions of civilians in that area. So that is an issue to be considered. I haven't got a clear answer to that. We also have this concept of regime change. And I noticed that the Guardian today has, or maybe it's the Observer, it appears in social media as the Guardian, saying, oh, are we near a regime change? And there's a lot of talk about Netanyahu addressing the Iranian people first on Friday, saying, you should fight your regime and join our war against the Islamic Republic. And then by Saturday, he's saying, we'll burn the capital flat to the earth. Now, I don't think that's good tactics. I'm no advisor to Netanyahu, but if you're trying to move a population against their government, opposed to their government, it's not a very good idea to tell them, oh, we're going to blow the life out of every single one of you. Having said that, I think regime change is more in the imagination of those sections of the right-wing opposition, the Iran Zionists, the royalists in Iran, or Republican Party paid Mujahideen Khalq, who are really the exact equivalent of Chalabi and people like that in Iraq, except they don't have the base because they supported Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq war. And most ordinary Iranians who talk to, even the non-political ones, hate them more than they hate the Iranian regime, and they remain Islamists. So you can imagine, I don't think they stand much of a chance. With regime change with the royalists, there are a number of problems. They have some supporters. I'm not denying they have some supporters, mainly gained, as I've kept saying, by the relentless propaganda of pro-Zionist TV stations and other European American TV stations who have always presented Israel as the poor little country surrounded by a modern democracy, surrounded by barbarians, Arabs. And of course, the reality, as we know, is that Israel is no democracy. It is a settler colonial country. It imposes apartheid on the population within its borders and so on. So, but this view, this image has had an effect. And of course, the incompetence of the Islamic Republic, the corruption of the leaders of the Islamic Republic, the fact that the country has lived in a state of crisis for 44 years, 45 years since its inception, means that people are tired. There is a tiredness about this regime. However, I think Netanyahu has once again given a gift to the Islamic Republic. If I understand it correctly, some of the demonstrations probably organized originally by the Iranian government, became huge in Tehran and other major cities. And you can imagine that the overwhelming sentiment in Iran is one of nationalism, is one of, whether it's correct or not, whether it's acceptable or not, nationalism in Iran has a very long history. Even uneducated people seem to have this foolish pride about 5,000-year history. Some of them say 7,000-year history. So that nationalism, in a way, trumps everything else. And you should not underestimate it. If you do, you are making a mistake. What are the options for Iran? First of all, Iran has lost its allies. At the time when the attacks were happening against Hezbollah, when the attacks were happening against Syria, I think some of us did say, this is not about Syria, this is not about the Lebanon. The main enemy is Iran. As Moshe pointed out, this is what Netanyahu has been working on. I remember I was looking at when did Netanyahu say Iran's nuclear bomb is a threat, and you can go back to 30 years, right? So and 30 years ago, he was saying it's only a few years away. 20 years ago, he was saying it's a few months away. Now he's saying it's a few days away. But the reality is that Iran is still far from achieving full nuclear capability, partly because it is not about enrichment of uranium. IAEA knows this very well. It's about delivery of nuclear weapons. And Iran's capability to deliver nuclear weapons remains very weak. If you compare the military capabilities of the two countries, I've been privileged to hear this from various experts in the last 24 hours. We are talking of two countries with disproportionate number of population, about 89 million people in Iran, 9 to 10 million in Israel. So the reserve army, the soldiers, the number of soldiers, Iran trumps Israel. But if you go anywhere beyond that, this is a war that will be fought by drones, by missiles, by air force. It's not even going to be a naval war. In all of those, Israel has far more missiles. It has far better drones, if not, it hasn't got more numerically, but it has far better drones. In terms of what has happened so far, we know that occasionally the rarer, better equipped supersonic missiles of Iran's Islamic Republic have penetrated the dome, the famous Iron Dome that is supposed to protect Israel, but many of them are stopped at the dome. So we are in that situation. Iran has lost its allies. Hamas is weak, and with Hamas, you have to keep telling these reporters who ask you, oh, but Iran and Hamas are the same. Iran and Hamas have had a very tumultuous relationship. At times, they've been allies. During the Iran-Iraq wars, they were enemies. During the Syrian civil wars, they were actually fighting each other. And in more recent times, Hamas has complained openly and publicly about the lack of support it expected from Iran and Hezbollah in the aftermath of 7th of October. So they are allies, but they are not, they've not always been allies. There are contradictions. Use your brain, don't use slogans, don't be so stupid, but you can't tell the reporters this. Iran has lost, most importantly, Syria. Not that the Syrian Assad regime would have been able to do much. He was quite useless, but Iran had bases, military bases with Revolutionary Guards in Syria. I have always argued they're not there because Iran loves Assad, whom it doesn't, Iran's leadership didn't think much of Assad. They are there so that if Israel attacks Iran, they're closer to attack Israel. Iran has and has had a historic relationship with Hezbollah. That is definitely true, but Hezbollah is considerably weakened. The new government in Lebanon is not giving Hezbollah the kind of free hand it used to have, but also without its charismatic leader Nasrallah, without all sorts of having lost large numbers of people after the horrific incident with these pages, which has frightened not just Hezbollah members, but ordinary Lebanese in terms of what a terrorist state, the Israeli right-wing government, can do to ordinary civilians in the middle of Beirut by blowing them up for no reason, but because they might have attended a Hezbollah meeting. So here we are, or they might be standing next to someone who is a Hezbollah member. So we don't have, Iran hasn't got Hezbollah, it hasn't got Syria, it has got the Houthis. On Friday, I watched videos of the Houthis, who every Friday do get about a couple of million people in Sanaa's main square. Crowds gather and support Palestine. On this Friday night, they were watching live Iran's attack on Tel Aviv, and they were clapping. But that is a very insignificant, if you like, victory, if one could call it a victory. There is no, in this battle, given the balance of forces, given the number of nuclear bombs that Israel has. I heard today Jericho 2 has bombs that has 3,000 kilogram uranium. So we are talking of a completely unbalanced situation. Iran has a couple of options. None of them look good. One of them is to close the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil goes through that. Oil prices have already gone up because of the war, but they will shoot up. It would be a dramatic change. My guess is that China would not want that and would advise Iran against it, but I don't know. The other option, which they have mentioned, is that they could attack US and European citizens. My guess is they will first go for military, but maybe they will go for civilians in neighboring countries. Again, that wouldn't work well for Iran. It would just prompt these countries to stage much harsher attacks and wars against Iran. They might be, and despite the fact that they canceled the negotiations in Oman today, there might be negotiations going on in secret. I wouldn't put it past the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic hasn't survived because it's a stupid government. It has survived because it is committed to its survival at any cost. We know what happened during the hostage crisis. There we were. And immediately after the hostage crisis, when the hostages were in Lebanon, the US hostages were in Lebanon, we had Iran Gate. So secret negotiations with the imperialist powers, they don't call them imperialists, they don't use Marxist terms, so don't be fooled by those who think Iran is a radical anti-imperialist. They call it world powers. They might be negotiating, we don't know. Just to finish, just a couple of points on what I think are important about the mistakes we shouldn't make. First of all, I think we can't simply compare this with the days of Hopi, hands-off people of Iran. I saw a leaflet today by an Iranian-led organization that was in Hopi saying, this is a war between Israel and Iran, nothing to do with the Iranian people. How stupid can you get? It's the Iranian people who are dying. It's the Iranian people whose houses are being destroyed. Israel is a fascist country that is attacking, is an extreme right-wing country, maybe not fascist in the historic terms, but is attacking another country in the region if this war continues, thousands will die. But more importantly, as Moshe pointed out, starvation in Gaza is still going on. It's not going to stop. It's going to get worse. I saw an IDF leaflet saying Iran is now priority 1 in our war. Gaza is second. Yes, because in Gaza, they're not fighting, they're starving people to death and they're forcing people out of Gaza. So yes, in terms of military operations, that might be true, but starvation in Gaza hasn't gone away just because headlines in British and Western media have changed from the terrible situations in Gaza to the war in Iran, against Iran. So no, this is a war with the Iranian people, and those who don't see it haven't understood anything about what is going on. And the first victims of this will be precisely the working class in Iran, those who want to fight against the regime. One of the targets of the Israelis yesterday was 2 main factories in Tabriz, Asaluye and Traktor Sazi. Both of them places where the workers have waged strikes and opposition have been on demonstrations against the Islamic Republic. Do you think they will continue that? Do you think they will take Netanyahu's flag and support the royalists? No, they won't. Traktor Sazi is one of the places where historically the working class has been left-wing and radical. And of course, they are going to be wondering what to do. And stupid leaflets that separate the Iranian people from this war are not going to gain anything for the Iranian left. On the British left, we've had well, I'm not sure if you can call them left, but we've got people like Alliance for Workers' Liberty telling us that Iran is a sub-imperialist power and an regional imperialist power. And you say, well, Iran can't defend its own capital. Never mind. It's been under sanctions for more decades. It can't feed its own people. How can it be an imperialist power? What is your definition of imperialism if you put such stupid comments on your website? So we are left with a very difficult situation. I think the left is confused. The left in Iran is very weak. The working class is weak. However, I think there will be solidarity with the Palestinians and with the Iranian people, but not with the Iranian regime. Where we will end up with all this is very difficult for me to predict, but I hope, comrades, in the quick Q&A, we can go further and argue some of the aspects of this.
Working class movement is very weak in Israel. That is the case in a political sense, if not in the sense of struggle on economic issues, in which it is quite militant. However, what a positive element is the general level of mistrust against Netanyahu, and this pervades Israeli society. A large part of Israeli society, including part of the working class, are very skeptical about Netanyahu's motives. Although in the first flush of war, there is a flood of patriotism that inundates the society, including the working class, there is also a residual mistrust of Netanyahu's motives in this, which is important. I would like to take this opportunity to answer 2 questions that haven't been asked. The level of precision and the effectiveness of the war on both sides. While the Israeli attacks have been very precise, although very careless about damage to civilians. That is to say, they are prepared to target military targets, even if, let us say, this involves a collateral slaughter of many civilians. They are not aiming at the civilians, but they are very blasé about causing this so-called collateral damage. On the other side, I think the Iranian weapons are much less precise and much more or less random. Many of them in their targets. For example, a family of 4 women were killed in the Palestinian Arab village of Tamra in Israel, in the Galilee. That is certainly not part of what the Iranians were aiming at, but simply because the missiles are not very precisely targeted. They are more or less random. A lot of civilian casualties occur not because they are aimed at them, but because they are simply not equipped with the precise targeting.
I should add that in the carelessness of the Israeli attacks, so the drones they used were actually in Iran. They were planted before. So this wasn't an air attack, as Haaretz and other papers have said. These existed as solid metal inside Iran, presumably taken in not just by Mossad agents, but now we think maybe Europeans and Americans as well. But the buildings they have brought down have had a lot of victims. So this is North Tehran, because these people weren't poor people. They weren't living in the shanty towns. They lived in the posh part of Tehran. And building blocks have been seriously damaged. But then the flats above and below these people, there are lots of dead people. One is 20 children died in one place. And that, I think, was some kind of I don't know, orphanage or something. There are a number of pictures of women, children dying in pictures being distributed. In terms of your question, Tina, which is important, I think we have to call for clear defeatism for Israel, defeatism for US position, defeatism for US allies of Israeli allies in Europe, UK included. So we are calling for that defeatism. I think that should be the defeat of imperialists, the defeat of Israel must be high on the agenda. It's not similar to other situations. We have to be very clear on that. I think we can say we see this as a war against the Iranian people, and we support the Iranian people without calling for victory of the Islamic Republic. I think that is something that would be very difficult to, I don't think even the Iranian people inside Iran that would go well. In terms of the axis of resistance, well, China and Russia don't consider themselves part of the axis of resistance. They are in the background, they occasionally help, occasionally they don't help. My question would remain that if China is so concerned, the second in power of the capitalist world, where has it been during the starvation in Gaza? Greta from Sweden took a boat. Okay, it was obvious it wouldn't win. Yeah, we knew it wasn't going to go anywhere, but she went. There's these French people walking in the heat of the summer in Egypt, trying to get to Gaza to support the Gazan population. Where is the wonderful China? Where is the Russian Navy? Why hasn't it tried to give food to the Gazan population? These people are after their own interests. They're not, I think for China, the question is okay, if their oil, cheap oil from Iran is stopped, then they might start some action. I don't know what. But beyond that, the only thing we have seen so far is resolutions, which they know will be vetoed by US in UN. So where are they exactly? I would like someone to educate me on China's great efforts to help the population of Gaza when they first face starvation. I'm not saying the war is against the Iranian people because they are the victims, but I am saying that because Israel's plans in the region are not about just the governments, but the peoples of the region. That's why I don't think it's just about Hamas. If Hamas didn't exist, and I've heard it from many people who've studied the region, there would have been a genocide in Gaza because Israel wants to assert its power, as Moshe explained very well. In the same way, I think even if the Islamic Republic didn't exist, Israel wants to become the major power of the region. And in that way, it would attack any country that it sees as a rival, as a regional rival. And a country with 90 million multi-nations in it would be considered an enemy. So this war isn't simply, I didn't say this has nothing to do with the Islamic Republic and its many terrible policies, including the fact that I think both Moshe and I have always argued against a nuclear Middle East and therefore against Iran having nuclear industry and enrichment of uranium. However, there is a very obvious imbalance here. You have a country that has hundreds of bombs, doesn't sign it, and then you have the Islamic Republic. So there is proportionality in what you say on that. And the question remains that it's not just that the Iranian people are the victims of this, it is that the Israeli government is attacking that whole country, irrespective of, I would have said, irrespective of its leaders, unless it was the royalists, the Shah, the pro-Zionist forces, because they lost an ally in the departure of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Now they want to reinstall his son, and I'll come back to that. The AWL's claim about Iran being imperialist is based on the fact that the pro-Zionist Kurds that AWL supports, and they are actually paid and financed by Mossad, are subjugated by Iran. And that is the imperialism of Iran. And I think that is really not correct. That's historically not something we can defend. Iran hasn't taken over any other country. I've opposed Iran's Islamic Republic my entire adult life, but I don't make up stories in order to justify that. There are very good reasons why one should oppose Iran's Islamic Republic. And Iran is not just not a proxy of China. Iran's leadership, its current leadership, is very keen for relationships with the United States. Its previous leaderships were in the same position. Iran has done everything it can to become a servant of the imperialist powers, and it's still doing that. So this idea that Iran is a proxy of China is just a Western propaganda. Yes, it has been thrown into that position during some times because of the isolation, because nobody else would deal with it, because countries faced billions of dollars of fines if they were dealing with Iran, and it has at times done that. But look at Iran's history in the Iraq-US war. Look at Iran's history in the Afghan war. In all of those, Iran did its best to support the United States. It's the United States that, as some comrades have said, can't forgive Iran for getting rid of their man in power, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. So I don't buy Iran being a proxy of China. Yes, there is a 25-year deal, but that doesn't make Iran a proxy of China. And I would say that's part of Western media illusions created by the Western media. In terms of what Ken was saying, I think Iraq and Libya are the scenarios. I think Libya is more the scenario we are looking at, because regarding Iraq, as stupid as the United States was, they had Chalabi. They wanted to replace Saddam with the Shia National Council, which they had been grooming in Washington, and we know the disaster that was. Mossad has cultivated, funded, done propaganda for the royalists. When we go to demonstrations in London, we see the royalists with their flag and the pictures of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi with the Zionists. They're in the same enclave. Police separates us from these demonstrators. So clearly they exist. You can't deny their existence. The question is, does they have any significance inside Iran? I don't think so. They have very good publicity machines. They have thousands of accounts in X, in Facebook, in social media, financed by Israel, very often bots, because you can see the same message happening time and time again. It's clearly bots. But I think they don't have or at least they don't have what they thought they have inside Iran, and we can see it now. In terms of the drones to Putin, I don't think Iran's drones are the only things that is helping Putin. They are not, they are very cheaply made, they don't last long, and my understanding is it's the numbers, because Iran can produce thousands of these on a cheap scale. The Russians use it. I don't think Putin and Trump will worry too much about the drones. I think they would worry more about the long-term consequences of this war. Maybe the drones were mentioned, but I really don't think the drones are part of that. To Ian's comment, the only thing I would add is that, yes, I think we are seeing an increased number of protests in France, in Portugal, in Spain. I heard about Portugal as well. These are important struggles, but on their own, unfortunately, they can't do much. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Moshe, do you want to reply to a few things? Sorry, you need to unmute, comrade.
Yes, briefly, as to the plans for the day after. Netanyahu is accused for not having a plan for the day after in Gaza. That is because this remark is addressed by people who don't realize that he has a very definite plan for the day after, not for a settlement, which is not in his book, but ethnic cleansing of the population of Gaza, annexing it to Israel and colonizing it with Zionist settlers. As to the plans regarding Iran, there have been some speculations about it in the Israeli press for a long time. What would be, from the Israeli point of view, the achievement of a conflict with Iran? And I think what has emerged from this is the following. I would say that the Israeli war, if it achieves its maximal, let us say, targets, is not aimed against the Iranian state, but against Iran as a country. That is to say, and I think this is an important distinction. This is not an Israeli war against this specific regime. Of course, they would like to, if they can replace it with a Shah regime, that would be regarded as an achievement. But ideally, if you like, what they would like to do is to break up Iran totally as a country. And I think whatever attitude we on the left take towards this war, we have to be aware of this distinction. It is not the same thing. So it is aimed against Iran as a nation, or as a country which is a multinational country. I think this is an important distinction to make. I don't recognize this kind of Marxism that takes no interest and takes no position in a war unless it's a class war. I don't think Marx would have recognized this position. There is such a thing as a colonial war, and the situation in the Middle East, including the Israeli attack on Iran, is within the context of the war of colonization, in which Israel is the colonizing state. If you take a symmetric attitude to both sides, the colonizer and the colonizer, then if it were Marxism, I would not want any part of this Marxism, because it is an immoral position. Simply crassly immoral. But it isn't a Marxist position, and it isn't something that Marx would have recognized. Thank you very much.
Well done, Moshe. Yasmin.
Kate, just very briefly again on Paul. Paul, I think that this disintegration of states in the Middle East is part of US policy. That's what they did in Libya. I think Mike is right. It's the era of destruction. Alain Badiou calls it the scorched earth policy. In the 1940s, in the 1950s, US was developing capitalism because there was interest in exploiting the working class of those countries. In our time, it's destruction, scorched earth. Look at Libya. And I think that is a realistic possibility for Iran. Partly because there is no alternative, the existing. I mean, I didn't know Laura Kunsberg was stupid enough to invite Reza Pahlavi. The guy doesn't even want to go back to Iran. He's said it time and time again. He says, I have a good life in US, why would I go? So this is all, if you like, imaginary by various people. We have not supported the Iranian government. Both Moshe and I were in the leadership of Hands of People of Iran. We maintained throughout its post-period an opposition to the Islamic Republic. I've spent most of my life fighting the Islamic Republic. So this is just ridiculous stuff to accuse us of supporting Iran. All I said was this attack was on Iran, on the rest of Iran and on the Iranian people, not just the government. The government is responsible for where we are. The government is responsible for corruption, for the economic hardships that has created these situations that Mossad can infiltrate sections of the working class as well as ordinary people, right? But we have no illusions about the Islamic Republic. When someone like John talks about democracy, you obviously haven't fought working class struggles under a dictatorship, under repression. Otherwise, you wouldn't make the stupid comments that democracy doesn't matter. Every time the working class fights in Iran, it gets shot at. So having democracy is not an illusion, isn't some silly midterm slogan. It's because it's a reality. You need that in order to fight the working class struggles. Your crass Marxism, as Moshe was talking about, is just silly. You need that to fight work class struggles. Class struggles don't happen in the cloud. don't happen on IT clouds. They don't happen in the sky. They happen on the factory floor, where you need to survive first, to live against a dictatorship. You need to fight with guns very often to survive. And so, yes, you do need that kind of democracy. We do want to remain on the slogans of blaming the Islamic Republic, calling for more rights. The workers' struggles will be the first victim of this war. Facts are the first victim, but the working class struggles. Throughout last week, I was following the strikes in various places, including Asaluye and Tractor Saji in Tabriz, where the Israeli bombs have landed. Do you think that has helped the class struggle? No. But we have to, obviously, none of us have given up on class struggle in Iran. All we are saying is the US wants revenge against the Iranian people. And that revenge against the Iranian people for daring to throw away the 1979 puppet regime of the Shah is not something simple. And so it's Israel, US are not just going to give up, even if they overthrow the Islamic Republic, in the same way that they wouldn't give up when they defeat Hamas. They are after destroying anyone who opposes the US's power, the US's control of the region, and Israel is doing the work for it. That's all I was trying to say. Thank you. Two very last comments. There are some scenarios that are being discussed, and one of those, and probably one of the worst ones, is that there is a possibility that the IDF will kill Khamenei. And given the intelligence they have, given the drones they have, that is a possibility. And of course, that will change the scenario a bit further, because then you are in a more chaotic system. Under such circumstances, I would argue that we could have a scenario of even more extremist fundamentalists coming to power in Iran under the leadership of the Revolutionary Guard, at least temporarily as an interim. And that would be a terrible situation as well. So that's all I have to say. Thanks very much, Tim.
Thank you.